Well, springtime is finally here, and with that, I think it's about time we start working on getting our engine into this old International. But before I actually put an engine in the truck, I have to figure out how to get it over there. So coming into the shop for a moment, here is my 454, and there beside it is my SM465, which is going behind it, and then beside that too is another old Clark heavy-duty transmission. So getting them over there is going to be kind of a pain, because I know this doesn't show up very well on camera. You have to forgive the auto exposure changing here, but this is actually quite a hill I'm on, and it's very poorly paved. So I've tried moving engines and transmissions over with the engine stand before, and it doesn't really work. It just kind of wants to tip over. So what I think I'm going to do, take a little bit of shuffling around, but I think we're going to take this guy, who I'm not using today, off of that stand he's got there, and then we're going to put the transmission on it and haul that over, and then we're going to put the 454 on it and haul that over. And to do that, I think we're probably going to use one of the ATVs that we stored this winter, just to kind of save on our back a little bit. Well, I have to say, that actually went on there much better than I thought. And in fact, if my entire driveway was as smooth as my garage was, it'd be no problem to push it over. Now, if you're wondering why it looks like it's kind of hanging off a little bit in the back, the reason for that... You see that little drain pan sticking out there, that little plug? Yeah, I don't want him to be resting on the, resting on my dolly there. I feel like I could end up destroying my bottom of my pan. And this guy is just on a block of wood. I think the only thing I'm going to do to it before I move it is I might just take a ratchet strap and just go underneath here, up maybe and around one of the pulleys, just to kind of, you know, just to keep it from rocking backwards off of that stand. And I'm going to tow it out with that guy. I don't think I've ever really shown this on this channel, not intentionally anyway. This is my 2002 Polaris Sports one I got off a buddy at work there, I think in the early winter time. It was quite a project. It needed a lot of work. It is mostly finished now. It just needs the plastics put back on, and I think it needs one CV boot. Yeah, right there. Other than that, though, it's in a really lovely shape. It drives really nicely. But my plan is just to use that trailer hitch and basically hook him up to that guy, and then I'm just going to tow him over. And you can see, if you look closely at the driveway, I mean, it's not in great shape. It's quite uphill. And yeah, it doesn't show up on the camera, but even like this here is quite a large bump. And then now I'm down into a depression. So definitely gonna need that just to haul it over here. And once I've got it in place, I'll bring the transmission over. And then we're gonna talk a little bit about how we're gonna get this set in there. So just in case you thought I might have been exaggerating with how difficult it is to move anything on this driveway, my pavement is so soft that this happened. Tire actually just broke through and is now fetched up on that. And it actually sent the engine briefly, but slowly, onto its side. So I had to reposition it up there and see where it landed on the starter there a little bit. And now I'm gonna have to get the crane over, lift it out of that hole, set it down and try it again. And hopefully this time it won't break through again. All right, so we got the engine over. It wasn't easy. It certainly fell through the pavement a few times. But it's over here now, and my only concern is that as much as I'd like to put the transmission on the back of this engine, which is actually over here, and bring it in one unit and then get it all mocked up with the new crossovers and such, I am a little bit worried about lifting it up very high with that transmission on the back, because I don't really trust this aluminum intake here to hold on to the pair of them. So what I'm probably going to do is bring the transmission over, slide it under the truck on its own, pick the engine up, put it more or less to where it's going to be, and then we'll actually make them when they're inside the truck. That way it's a whole lot less pressure on this guy here. So I think that's the plan moving forward. Yeah, now we'll just bring the transmission over. Okay, so it's a new day for me. Yesterday, that dolly that I had used to bring over my engine there had just completely fallen to pieces. It was no good anymore. So I just used the hardware from it and some old stairs that I had from inside, and built a new dolly and used that to bring over the transmission. Before we get to putting things in, I should probably just clarify a few points that I haven't talked about a whole lot yet, which is that if you look down this rail tunnel here, you're going to see that there are no cross members or any kind of mounting hardware anywhere. So you might be wondering, well, how am I putting the transmission engine in? And I'm just using some prefab cross members I bought. I've got one for the engine and I've got a separate one for the transmission. And in another episode, I put those, the mounts on right here. And today, I finally got mine for the transmission. This is the transmission side mount. So I'm going to throw him on there. And then once we've got everything roughly mocked up into place, then I'm going to put those the cross members in, and then we can kind of bolt and weld everything in. Now, if you're worried about driveline angles with this machine, I really wouldn't be. And I'll just take you around the back quickly and show you why. So normally when you're putting in an engine and transmission, you have to be really careful with your driveline angles to make sure that you're kind of minimizing vibration, especially if you're building a performance machine, which this is not. So there's two big reasons I'm not really overly worried about that with this machine. And the first one is my rear end is geared at, I believe, 6.5 to 1. And that's in its high range. It's a 2-speed. So it's not like I'm going to be doing more than, I may see 60 miles an hour just to do it, but 40, 50 miles an hour really is probably the most that I'm going to be going with this until I switch that rear end out someday. So that's one reason I'm not too worried about it. And the other reason, around, is right here. So we have a 2-piece drive shaft. Actually, you can see both pieces right there. And we've got this carrier here in the middle, and the old engine and transmission was actually just a straight shot back to this guy. So because of that, it's really going to minimize our vibration. All I have to do is get us close enough to this. I'm not doing, the full long shot way back there. You can see there's the front of the truck. Still a little ways to go, but yeah, this isn't a machine I'm going to worry too much about that with. And really, there's a third reason, I suppose, too, which is that how far we can drop this transmission and engine depend really on our frame rails. And ideally I should drop them a little bit lower than the frame rails if I could, but that's not really possible. So what I'm really going to do is just drop them as low as I can. And yeah, that'll just have to be good enough. Now, I know that yesterday I said that I was going to take that transmission and slide it underneath of the truck and then mount the engine into the transmission when it was in the truck, just to save a little bit of stress on the head of the engine here, the intake, the aluminum intake especially, being the lifting point. But I've kind of decided against that, and the reason really is just that even though I can get that transmission under the truck, there's lots of clearance. With these cross members and such in the way, I really don't think I'm going to be able to lift it up in place, especially not with a transmission jack, which I don't think I can get a hold of today. So I'm basically going to backtrack on what I said yesterday. I'm just going to bolt it together, and we're going to hope that she's good enough. Now, I'm pretty certain it won't really cause any damage because I did take I had a big block connected to a much larger transmission, the one that we saw earlier in my garage. I took that out in one piece and it was fine. I did do a little bit of checking around online last night, and people say that doing it like this is fine. But I guess we'll find out together. But first, we're going to put that this little mounting pad here for our cross member for the transmission on the bottom of our transmission. And then we'll put it all together and lift it in and get it all mocked up. Well, everything is all bolted up. The transmission is torqued to spec, so with that, I think that we're just, we're ready to go in. Whew. I'm a little bit daunted with the task of picking this up and putting it in there, and something not fitting or not everything going right, but let's just see what happens, I guess. So I've just come to a bit of an epiphany here, something I had kind of forgotten about. But there's not a whole lot of clearance between the front of this big block and the back of my crane. So I've only got, you know, maybe 12 inches there to play with. And I've forgotten about this, and if you come over here, you know, the engine's gonna sit back in here. Actually, probably even behind this cross member. I might have to end up removing that, we'll see. But I think that I'm gonna have to take this whole front push bar off, I think, at the very least, that front push bar, so I can get the crane up to here. That buys me another, like, probably 8 inches or so. And then that gap, hopefully I can bridge. All right, we better get to that first. I got it.
Woohoo! You're famous. Only took 2 hours.
Well, here's a problem I probably should have saw coming. My jack stands underneath my axle there are just the right size to not allow my engine stand through. So I'm gonna have to go get a jack, floor jack, pick up that axle, move those stands around, drop it back down, and then carry on. All right, so I ended up moving the jack stand on the passenger side over a little bit to make room for one leg. And then I just dropped it down. I just took the one on the right side out altogether on the driver's side, because that tire is still there and it's still holding, well, it's probably not holding air, but it's a bias ply, so it'll stay up. So now we just gotta get it pushed in. I feel like it's so simple. Oh, just gotta get it pushed in. No big deal. Okay, so I've been doing a little bit of thinking about how we're going to get this to fit in and where it's going to sit. So this cross member here, this is where the old engine sat at. That was the cross member for the front of it. It was an inline 6, so it was quite a bit longer and taller than this engine. So if you look up top of the engine cowl there, you can see, you know, how much vertical room I have to play with. That doesn't really do anything for me. But it is a little bit nicer in a way that it's shorter because it gives me a little bit more room to play with. So what I'm thinking is originally I had planned to take this whole engine and set it back in quite a bit. It was going to sit, gonna see where the indent is there. It was going to sit further down this tunnel. And then you can see the top of the transmission there, that's where the shifter would go. That would be, if all things lined up properly, stick you under the tarp. That would pop out here in this tunnel. And as it stands now, it's got quite a ways to go, probably near 8 inches. I don't know how well you can see that. I can't even see the front of the phone. Well, 8 inches before it even comes out of here. It really used to whatever about the center there. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give up on that altogether, and I'm going to put in a remote shift linkage, sorry. Because there's just no way that transmission is going to come back far enough. It's not nearly as long as the other one was. Seems like the steering wheel is right here, so you know, shifter should be floating around here somewhere. Right now, it's up in the firewall. So that's all right. That'll just be a fun project for some time. I'm not really too worried about being able to do that. Step back, go to the tarp. Come around. So the next issue we run into, if we want to keep the engine more forward now, like the new plan, is that this is our steering box here. This is our steering box here, sitting just behind our cross member. So on the inline 6, where the engine mount sat, you can see on the 454 here at V8, it's sort of in the middle of the engine, but on inline 6, it was actually way up just in front of the harmonic balancer, or where it is on this engine anyway. So it would actually have been ideal if I had another inline 6, but I don't. So my engine mount is much further back, so that kind of ends up interfering here. I was pretty worried about that, but it looks like it might be okay. A little bit of shimmying and it should be in place. So you see this guy here. There we go. So this fella right here, this is the cross member I've shown off in another episode. This is what will eventually hold up my 454. You can see him coming around over this side. He's by no means bolted on, and actually I don't even have one of the ends on over here. But just for the sake of kind of mocking them up, so I've got this side hooked on, and I was pleasantly surprised to see that once this side gets hooked on, it's not yet, I'll have to lower the engine. But that actually fits. Yeah, sorry, you probably can't see a whole lot of that. Anyway, it does fit underneath of this guy, which is perfect, because if I had to move that steering linkage, that would have been a big project, probably more than I wanted to take on right now. So I'm really, really glad that's not going to happen. So it looks like we should just work out. I can pretty well drop the engine, and as far as going, you know, front or back, it'll stay about where it is. It'll just come down and twist a little bit. You can see my transmission is sort of pointed down. Looks pretty dramatic in the camera. It's not quite that dramatic in real life. So there'll be a little bit of adjusting still. So the only thing that'll have to change right now, before those cross members can be put in place, is that this front cross member is going to have to be notched pretty good. Now I could just cut this out, right? Like normally it wouldn't be that big of a deal. I wouldn't even have this cross member in there because all it's doing is getting in the way. But the issue is there's only a few cross members in this truck, and I've already cut out the middle one because that's where the transmission used to go. So you can't see it from there. Just look underneath. There's actually no cross members until about halfway down the truck where the drive shaft is going through. That was odd. My camera just shut off on me. Anyway, with no cross members holding like the front half of this truck together, I'm a little bit worried that if I completely cut this guy out, that my frame rails will sort of splay apart, and that would be a disaster I probably couldn't come back from. So what I'm gonna do, I think, is I'm gonna sort of wiggle this guy into place, get him in the transmission as mocked up as I can just for the moment, and then I'm going to notch this guy. So I don't know how far back I can go right now. I got a little bit of wiggle room anyway, so I'm gonna push myself back just a little bit more, and then I'm just gonna notch. Yeah, it'll probably end up being at least half of this cross member out. I might even just take this pulley off the front here. It would probably be a very smart idea. So I'll probably take that pulley off, and then I'll notch that cross member. And then I should be able to drop him down and get him mocked up. And then I can put my cross member in, weld and or bolt him in. And then, then we'll have that sort of, I guess it would be lateral strength back in the truck. And then I can either finish cutting the rest of that out, or I can leave it. It kind of depends on how it all fits in. For right now though, yeah, I'm really glad. I was worried for a moment that this wasn't going to clear. I was also quite worried about, if we take a look at this, again, this would be not the drive shaft, the steering shaft, coming out of the cab. Right now, it's pretty much pushed up against the side of this engine, which, especially when you look at the, the exhaust coming out of, sorry for the shaky camera work, the exhaust coming out of here definitely is going to hit that. But I'm pretty certain that I've got, miles and miles of room over here that I can just sort of, scooch my way over a little bit. So I really shouldn't have too much of a problem clearing that. I don't think I'm going to be able to use my current headers because my current headers are quite a bit wider. I'd say what's going to end up happening probably is I might end up with a set of like ram horns, which dump out of the center, and it'll be easier just to have them dump out of the center and then go around this guy versus, each one coming out individually. But that's kind of something for later on down the road. We can move this if we have to. I just really, really, really don't want to. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of the worst part of it is over. I know that the engine now is going to go in. I know it's going to clear. I know that it's going to work basically, and I'm going to be able to put my mounts in. And yeah, that's all I wanted out of today. All right. Well, first things first. I think we're going to get this this pulley off there. I know that technically, there's no real point to taking it off since I am going to need to have room for it to clear eventually anyway. But I still kind of want it off there just for extra working room. Especially because I know I'm not going to get everything all permanently mounted up today anyway, so I can take it off and it'll be easier to put some blocking under it and everything so that I can do this later on. So at least for now it's going to come off. Honestly, that wasn't too bad. Okay, so as far as engine location, I pretty well got it as far back as I needed to go. And I can twist it over. Do this to block on the camera. Bring it over like so. And then use a boat level. And then I can drop it down onto the crossmember mount there. It's kind of, the whole truck is sideways in the driveway, so the engine kind of wants to tilt over a little bit. But all I really have to do now is I have to cut out this cross member. I can notch it for this guy. Again, I will have to notch it more later, but I'll reinforce it first. So first I'm going to cut out both from here over like so. I'll probably just use the sawzall, to be honest, to do that. At that point, I can drop this guy, the front of him. I can drop the engine down onto those mounts, and that'll take the weight. And then in the back, I'm going to have to jack the transmission up. Because the transmission, the whole thing is currently like this, so I'm going to have to jack the transmission up a little bit. And then I'll put those mounts on. Again, I'm just going to set them on the frame because this is a C-channel. I can actually just push the crossmember in and, it'll sit there well enough to hold the engine overnight. While it rains and stuff, I can get it all covered up. But yeah, and then from there, I can just come back out with the crane and kind of make little small adjustments and get everything into its final resting place, and then I can weld everything in. So yeah, progress has been slow. It's been one of those days where it takes it 10 times longer to do anything. Every bolt is stuck and needs to be cut off, but at least it's moving forward. I haven't been stuck on anything I couldn't overcome so far, so I'll take it. So just to show you that hole we've got cut, you can see we've got about half of this crossmember cut out, and I think he should fit in there pretty well by the time I get him set down. I can widen it up a little bit. So the plan is to get him set down so that he's resting on the crossmember that I've picked up for him. Now again, this isn't going to be welded or secured in there right now, it's just resting on there, and that'll be fine. And then we'll do the same thing for the transmission crossmember in the back. I'll have to come in and probably with like a floor jack and just pick that guy up a little bit. And then we'll have a pretty good idea of where it'll be sitting at. So it looks like first I'm going to have to remove some lines off of this fuel pump. They're kind of getting in the way of what's left of the crossmember here. And in fact, this fuel pump, mechanical fuel pump, in the general is kind of in the way. I don't know if I'm going to end up having clearance for this or not when everything's set into its final location. I had asked a question in the previous episode what people thought of doing a mechanical fuel pump versus an electric one, especially because I'm going to be drawing from 2 tanks and they're going to be a little ways back. And I kind of got mixed responses. Some people like mechanical, some people like electrical. I was personally leaning towards mechanical because I wanted to keep as few electronics in the truck as possible. But if I'm not able to kind of shimmy this back in a way that it fits and I'm comfortable with it, then you know that kind of answers my questions for me. And I'm just going to end up with electrical for sure. Yeah, I'm going to have to be where you are in order to move that. But I'm going to get that line taken off the bottom, which you kind of can't. You can just kind of see this band clamp poking it right there. So we're going to get that line removed, and then we're going to see if we can, you know, set the engine down a little bit to its final-ish resting place. Next up now, just want to turn this guy a little bit while we drop him down. Hopefully get all that lined up. So he doesn't have very far to go. I'm just going to try and drop him really gentle. It's pretty close. Not giving us any issues with clearance anywhere else. That's good. It's staying nice and free. Actually, come on. See, I can't lift this crossmember up. Yeah, because it's hitting underneath this guy. So I kind of have to bring the engine down on top of it very slowly. Alright, I kind of need to get to where you are in order to button that in, but I'm just going to put the bolt through that to take the weight, and then we'll move on to that transmission. Okay, so after much to do, we finally got that mount attached to the side of the crossmember. And if we come over to the other side, so we've also got that mount on. Now, this crossmember isn't welded in. See, that guy doesn't even have an end on him. He's just sitting on the inside of the frame rail. And if we come over here, this guy actually does have the end cap on him, but he's not welded in either. He's just sitting there for now. That's okay. Again, this isn't a, you know, we're not going to have this in its 100% permanent location all welded up and secured today. We're just going to get everything mocked up and close enough. And now what we have to do, see that transmission poking there, where are we at there? Too many things to weigh the camera. So our transmission is currently unsupported, just hanging out the back of the engine. So what I'm going to do is put a jack stand under that guy, lift him up into his proper position, which will be just at the bottom of the frame rails there. And yeah, see how that goes. It might end up being that we need to do some clearance work with the body and that shifter. I'm not sure 100% where it's going to come up through the floor at. I am pretty sure at this point there's going to have to be a remote shifter put in, which is okay. Yeah, we'll get to that anyway. We'll start putting him up, and then once he's either got a crossmember under him in between the frame rails, or if that's not going to happen tight, I could just block him. But once I've got that done, I can take some weight off of the crane. Things will more or less sit here on their own, and that'll probably be where we call it for today. All right, you'll have to sort of forgive the camera work here as I try and do this one-handed. But the idea is just to get the jack right about there underneath that transmission. Probably have to use that little bit of wood there beside him. And we're gonna push up on the bottom side of that transmission and make them level. And while I do that, I'm gonna have to go back and forth a few times to the crane, because as I change the level of the transmission, I'm also changing the level of the engine, kind of like that. And I gotta make sure that I'm not lifting everything up too much. I might have to drop the crane a little bit as I do that. So what I'll probably do is I'm just gonna jack this up and I'll bring this back when it's done and show you what we're left with. Okay, so we're back under the truck now, and I've taken the transmission and crossmember here, and it's kind of dark on this wide angle, but I put the feet on it. You can go and see this one a little bit better. And just like the front one, he's not actually bolted or welded in, it's just sitting on the frame. I can move it back and forth. But if we get him level, here we go. So it gives us a good idea of where the transmission should sit, and it's actually very close to sitting in the proper spot right now. Of course, I can slide this forward, and I will, to meet the transmission. But basically, hopefully you can see this. This guy here needs to sit just underneath of here. So I need about another inch and a half, maybe 2 inches. The issue is that that guy right there at the top of my very tall shifter tower is currently hitting right underneath the floor. There's a little cross member there. I don't know how many times I said the word cross member in this video. And you see he kind of lands up right sort of where the cab meets the floor. So what I might end up doing, I'll just take a good look, what I may end up doing is just cutting a crude hole, kind of like what I did for the crossmember up front, just to give me that extra couple inches of clearance. And then when the time comes later on, I'll box that back in with some new sheet metal. So I almost feel a little bit bad about this, but if you look very carefully on top of that shifter tower, you'll notice a tiny amount of rust. Just a little bit, just, you know, surface rust. And I've just wiggled it so it's just past that cross member there. And I know this is kind of a dodgy thing to do. You can't see much from up top. Anyway, there's yeah, see, there's the top. So that's actually a pretty good place once I put that once I get a remote shifter fabricated up. That's actually a pretty good spot for it to sit. So with that in mind, I'm actually kind of thinking about just hauling down on the handle here a few times just to get it to where it'll be in position. Because I mean, there's no metal there anyway, to be frank. So may as well. Ooh, I feel bad about this. Ooh, I feel bad about this. Let's see, I might actually have to use the camera since I can't see this myself. Are we gonna pass that? Oh yeah, we're gonna get right past that transmission crossmember. Actually, we're almost too far past it. Almost kind of want to pull it all back a little. Crunch, 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 crunch. Come up to the floor. Crunch. Yep. And now. Look at that. Okay. Honestly, a joke aside, that feels really bad to do, to just put that up through the rust spot in the floor there. But, you know, I mean, it works out anyway. I do have a cloth stuffed in there too, so it's not like all that rust is going to get inside. Plus, I'm going to flush it and whatnot before I use it anyway, so I'm not terribly worried about that. And the reason, in case you're wondering why I didn't just get a deeper drop, this is a 3-inch drop here. The reason I didn't go with the 6-inch drop, which would have let me keep that shifter tower out of the floor altogether, is because then the transmission and engine would have been angled down too much. So the way I've got it set up right now with my engine crossmember and my 3-inch drop back here, the crankshaft and the center of the yoke here will stay more or less perfectly horizontal with that bar and that bar. So I know that right now my transmission and crossmember pack are essentially level, at least this way. I do have to work out, you know, side to side and stuff a little bit, and I'll do what I can to kind of get it lined up with that guy. But you can see he's a couple inches beneath the frame rails anyway. So it's not like I'm going to be too worried about this here. My engine is level-ish anyway, that's all that's really going to matter. And again, not a performance machine. I'm someone bad for getting caught up on details and wanting every little thing like driveline angles and such to be like totally perfect. And that, to be honest, that's why some of the stuff in this truck has taken so long, because you're kind of getting caught up in those little details. Again, if this was a performance machine, you know, that would really matter. It really doesn't matter for this context, to be honest. I think what matters right now is just like get this back on the road, and make a little more progress on it than I have lately. That's really my only concern. So that's going to be the focus, I think, going forward. Now that I've got that guy blocked in there, I can actually set him down. Now he's not set down right now, but I'm going to set him down and let this take some pressure and make sure I'm happy with the way it sits. And then I think that'll be it. I mean, right now anyway, everything is not permanently in place, but it's in here enough that I can put the tarp on it and cover it up for the rain we're supposed to get for the next couple of days, before I get back out here and start picking away at this again. So yeah, honestly, I'm really happy with this. I didn't think I was gonna get the cross members and everything even pseudo mounted up like I have now in one day. So it took longer in one sense than I thought it would, but in the other sense, I can't believe how much got done, really. So for the right now, there is no weight at all on any of these chains. So it's just the cross members right now keeping that up, which is good. It sits. I'll have to take the level out. Not that it matters because, you know, the whole truck is level, but it's sitting more or less level, I think, with the frame rails. So I'm happy with how that's sitting in there. I am going to put a little bit of weight back on that crane, and probably leave it out here just for safety's sake, especially because my dogs love to run underneath of this truck because they saw a squirrel go under at one time, and now they think that squirrels just pop out of the truck. So I'll probably keep the crane on there just to keep a little bit of pressure there, just for safety's sake. And yeah, that should be it. I think I'm probably done for today.